Before we get into the meat of things, this essay is going to have spoilers for Ted Lasso through episode 7 of season 2. This week's video for Tears and Rain is going to be a little bit different than my normal fare, mostly because I'm having some computer issues that are making it hard to source footage, so you're going to get a lot more of this. I'm sorry. I only recently got into Ted Lasso. I know it's been around for a while, and by recently, I mean I'm recording this on Sunday, so literally 4 days ago, just in time for the newest episode to air, and I loved it. It's a fantastic show, and I like the second season more than the first. Something that's really stood out to me as I've been watching this, though, is how the show is a lesson in futility. Now, that might sound a bit strange, given that the hook of the show is that Ted Lasso is the most optimistic man you're ever going to meet, but that's part of the futility that we see. Especially in this new season, we're really seeing Ted's positive mindset take a toll on his mental health. That's part of what we're going to explore today, as well as taking a look at Rebecca's arc in the first season to explore what Ted Lasso has to say about futility and emotion. Ted Lasso's first season is about the futility of spite. Most of this comes from Rebecca. She becomes the new owner of AFC Richmond's football club after her husband, the previous owner, Rupert, divorces her after cheating on her repeatedly and in secret. So she sets out to do the rational thing. Take the club that he loved and absolutely destroy it and burn it into the ground. The first step is to hire Richmond's current coach and hire the American coach Ted Lasso, who has no idea what British football, or as we call it, soccer is. Her plan to have Ted destroy the Richmond team doesn't go as smoothly as she expected. Ted's an absolute optimist who refuses to let anything put a damper on his mood, and the way he coaches doesn't align with what Rebecca expected. After all, with Ted, it's not about winning. Rebecca takes increasing steps to sabotage Ted and the Richmond team. She sets him up for a fake scandal, trades away the team's best player to Manchester City, and plots to embarrass him in the local papers by hiring a critical journalist to follow him around. Ultimately, Rebecca's plans fall apart as Ted soldiers on with a mustached smile and a box of biscuits in hand. In the end, she's the one who changes, finding herself embracing Ted's passionate, optimistic bearing and finally caring. The funny thing is, Rebecca ends up succeeding in the end. The Richmond team gets relegated, just as she originally desired when they lose their final game against Manchester City. The real kicker is how they lose, because she traded away their ace player, Jamie. But Jamie wasn't just responsible for winning the game because he's a good football player. Well, that's part of it. It's also because he embraced what Ted was trying to teach him. Jamie was responsible for winning the game, not for making the winning goal, but for making an extra pass before that goal, the exact lesson Ted worked to distill in him. It took some time, and it was a little bit more roundabout than Rebecca might have expected, but Ted's hiring did indeed lead to Richmond's downfall. On the one hand, this might make Rebecca's spite seem worthwhile. After all, she did succeed in her goal. It just wasn't her goal by the time it came to pass. The only thing that changed was her mindset. In that final game, she actively wanted to see Richmond succeed. The futility comes from the lack of sustainability in Rebecca's spite. To get revenge on Rupert, she lived a double life, smiling to Ted's face while stabbing him in the back. However, she found her barriers of spite and the distance she tried to force between herself and other people to keep her safe crumbling as Ted and also Keeley grew closer to her. In the final episodes, Rebecca found herself at a crossroads with her friends. Her director of football operations and friend and unwilling accomplice Higgins finally had enough of betraying such a kind-hearted man, and he quit. Keeley discovered that Rebecca was the one who tried to set her and Ted up to fail with the photo scandal and delivered an ultimatum of her own. Rebecca had to tell Ted the truth. And this is the point where Rebecca changed. She could have gone on as she was, as the spiteful woman who would eventually win the day and have her revenge and be completely alone in doing so, or she could embrace the relationships that were growing around her. In the end, Rebecca chose the relationships because she realized her life of spite was unsustainable. What would she have to gain by destroying all of these lives, except a tiny moment of victory before she realized that there really wasn't much else around her? It would be easy to attribute this change to Ted's superhuman optimism. In the first season, he seems almost heroic as he goes about bringing the Richmond team together, breaking down Rebecca's walls, building good relationships and goodwill with people who don't even necessarily want him around. The second season challenges this, however. It shows the faults in Ted's overly optimistic attitude and the damage that has on his mental health. The second season is about the futility of Ted's optimism. Nobody can deny that Ted is a cheery fellow. He does his best to be the best version of himself, and he tries to bring that out in everybody around him. But Ted's not without fault, and he's written with one of my favorite character structures. His greatest strength is also his greatest weakness. Ted's optimism is more than a personality trait. It's a barrier between himself and the realities of the world around him. Part of what helps him be so charming is how oblivious he is to the world around him, but that can also be damaging. Ted's optimism might be what helped us as an audience fall in love with the show, but it's also why his wife left him. Of course, the first season of Ted Lasso showed that burst of optimism was just what everybody needed. In the first season, Ted was the only character who didn't have a major character arc. He did have a couple of major life events happen. He moved to a new city and a new country, and his wife left him, but he never changed. We did see some deteriorations in his mental health. He seemed to have his first ever panic attack while the team was away at the karaoke club. And we did see some cracks in his optimism, especially when he had to ponder the reality of the divorce with his wife. This divorce was one of the few things that was able to pierce Ted's bubble. In the second season, though, we are getting a much better glimpse of the limits of Ted's relentless, almost toxic positivity. In the very first episode of the season, one of the Richmond players, Danny, accidentally kills a dog in a horrific football accident. Ted's optimism is basically a pat on the shoulder, saying it's all right, and moving on. Because he's so isolated from the world around him, Ted isn't able to really help Danny. Sure, the pat and the smile and the goodwill goes a long way on helping two teammates mend a bridge, but it's not going to do anything for the kind of psychological damage Danny took. Which is how we get the absolutely lovely sports psychologist, Shannon. Shannon comes in to help Danny, and she ends up being such a success that Richmond hires her to stay out the season. Initially, Ted is very wary of Shannon because of a poor experience with couples therapy in the past. He does eventually approach her to try and help after his mental health deteriorates to the point where he has to leave the pitch in the middle of a game. But it's not easy. Ted struggles deeply in the newest episode with his barrier. In order for him to truly make any progress and connect with Sharon, he's going to need to let the bubble go. He needs to let it burst, let it be gone, and face reality. Instead, he chooses to fight and flee at the same time. Perhaps one of the most interesting parts about Ted's arc this season is that he understands he's in a bad place. He understands that he needs help, that his mental health is deteriorating, but he needs to accept reality. This season is using Ted's optimism very similarly to how the first season used Rebecca's spite. They were both insulating barriers the characters used to protect themselves from the realities of the outside world, especially as it related to their divorce. Much like in the first season, Ted appears to quickly be approaching a crossroads where he's going to have to decide whether he wants to let reality in or lose everything to live in blissful optimism. Hopefully he makes a good choice. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this week's episode of Tears and Rain about Ted Lasso. It's really been a delight of a show. I kind of wish I had watched it a little bit sooner, though there are benefits to being able to just binge my way through the first season and most of the second. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this video essay? What do you think about Ted Lasso in general? It's really been a charming show unlike anything I've seen before. I just can't wait to see more. Hopefully this season finale doesn't have too sour of an ending with a guy like Ted. That's going to be kind of hard, but you never know. So thanks again for watching. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.